Oh, hidden life, vibrant in every atom. Oh, hidden light, shining in every creature. Oh, hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee. No, he is therefore one with every other.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. And it's a matter of great joy for us to welcome all of you here today on such a special occasion in the memory of Dr. Annie Besant that we are having today, who was indeed a remarkable and a distinguished individual. And also, as a divine coincidence, we have the ninth and the final day of event here in India, which is called Durga Puja. That is the celebration and worshipping of the divinity in the feminine form. And who better exponent of feminism or women empowerment than Annie Besant? More than joy, right now I feel honored and fortunate to share the space with Mr. Tim Boyd, the International President of the Theosophical Society, the 8th International President of Theosophical Society from United States of America. Myself, Shikhar Agnihotri, who serves here in the Theosophical Society campus in the General Manager's office. So together we welcome you all on this very special day. Normally what we would have a talk or a lecture on Annie Besant, and the speaker would be sharing the life events of Annie Besant, which is very good. But today is little different in the sense that not only we are here to give a talk, but a dialogue, not only to praise her greatness or revere her, which she deserves, but also to look at her human aspects, the challenges that she faced, which you, me, everybody feels all the time, maybe not to that degree, but maybe even some people face it to even higher degree. And how she surpassed those challenges, overcome those difficulties to become whom we know as Annie Besant. So to begin with, I invite Mr. Tim Boyd to share some of his views, how he looked at Dr. Annie Besant.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Shikhar. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. October 1st is the birth date of Annie Besant, 1847. She was born. I have been serving as president here for about 12 years now. So this will be about the 12th time that I have spoken on this occasion. You would think that you would run out of things to say. Unless I was speaking about my wife or my daughter, normally I would. But when it's Annie Besant, it seems as if with every time you take a look, there's more there. It's one of those things that comes with those people that you could describe as truly great. And there are a lot of good people in the world. I would consider probably all of us good people. But greatness is something that is of another level. It's not to say that we don't have it within us, each one, but the cost, very often, of all that comes with greatness is more than most of us are prepared to pay. In the case of Annie Besant, as with others, it's always occasions where we call them to mind are always necessarily special times. On such occasions, we really invite the presence of great people, to consider them from different sides, to ask them to kind of come before us, to remind us of their greatness, and to have a few moments where in our own reflections we can live in their presence, though it's brief. Our program, the title for it is called Crossroads to Courage?
Of courage.
Crossroads of Courage, which is one I had to think about for a minute. You know, I knew it was going to be Annie Besant's birthday, but then Crossroads of Courage, the relationship. One of the things that has become clear over time is that, you know, oftentimes we view courage in mistaken ways. Some people have the idea that courageous people have no fear, which to my mind is a mistaken idea. It does seem that people who we would describe as courageous are those ones who recognize fear, but at the same time recognize that there is something more important, something beyond that they are willing to reach toward and willing to be led toward. And with that sort of leading, with that sort of reaching, you find that there is this potential for something great to occur. Problem with courage, it has a price. It has a price. The whole idea that we say very often of in the spiritual life, lead me from darkness to light. In that same leading, you're led to other things. Necessarily, you're led from the safety of group thought to the aloneness of standing there on your own in the face of something that oftentimes you're there because you see truth and you see something that is no longer true to you. And so this is the thing that Annie Besant had to deal with in her life. You know, if you were to go and see where she is interred, her ashes are, she wanted her epitaph to be, she tried to follow truth. And she was one who did that. And, you know, hopefully during the time that we're talking together, we'll get a chance to explore some of the avenues that were true to her, that became exhausted for her. She didn't do things halfway, so she was able to experiment in her own life, the laboratory of her own life, the laboratory of her own consciousness, and take the blows and learn the lessons. And so one apparent truth after another was exhausted to the point that she found her way here. At which point, she says that she found really what she had been looking for unknowingly for a lifetime. So maybe, Shikhar, can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
You are a student of the wisdom, the ageless wisdom, and probably because you came to it through the theosophical approach to wisdom, you encountered Annie Besant and her thought. What has been the impact of that on you?
Actually, while preparing for today's discussion, I have been studying and thinking a lot on this subject, but when there is something you have to present, so your thoughts become condensed. And then I ask myself that if somebody asked me to define Annie Besant's life in one word, that would be courage. If it is two words, that would be courage and integrity. And if it is three words, I'm not going more than three. It will be courage, integrity, and a lover of truth. The word Philalethian for that. Because these three things, if we see her life, as you just explained, she never compromised on things, principal things in which she believed in. And the cost, yes, there is always a cost. The courage is in every one of us, but are we willing to pay the cost that comes as a consequence? But she was not only willing, she did. Her marriage, first of all, to begin with, her children were taken away from her. Can we imagine in current situation, family breakups, separation from children by force? And at one point of time, the things were so dark in her life that she even thought of committing suicide. That I think many people have read about. And that was the time when her younger daughter, Mabel, both of her children, Arthur and Mabel, were suffering from whooping cough. And more than, they were suffering, but she was suffering even more physically in taking care and emotionally seeing your child in such a condition. And one day, one doctor came, and in that fit of whooping cough, with no other option, he put a drop of chloroform and gave her, and she slept nicely, but he was not expecting her to see alive in the next visit. But everything went well. So in this moment of darkness, when Annie Besant was questioning her faith, that if the God Almighty is looking all this suffering, either he or she is not able to do anything, which means the omnipotence is questioned, or agrees with it, which is even worse. So at that moment, she thought there is no other way, and the only way she felt was to get rid of this situation by leaving the body. And she went to the room, got the chloroform, opened the bottle, brought near to the lips, and a voice came. We can speculate whether it was the voice of masters or her inner voice or divine voice of the silence, whatever it may be. But whatever that sentence came out also made the quality of courage in her. The sentence was, "O coward, who would pray to have martyrdom but cannot even face few years of suffering." And by hearing those words, she felt ashamed and she threw the bottle. And from then on, she never looked back. And as you also said, one after the other events, it's very interesting. And I think it happens with everyone. We are looking at her life, but I think it happens with everyone when we look back, connecting the dots. Each of the event in her life, which was supposed to be a challenge, a problem, or a difficulty, when she responded to that situation in a proper manner, led her to the next step. And all these steps finally converging to H.P. Blavatsky. And so if we say that the challenges, if we remove the challenges from our life, because normally we want comfort, we want happiness, we want pleasant times. But then would there be any possibility for growth? And so, if I may ask, that how do you think, because the current world scenario, every 3 minutes, 4 suicides takes place. Stress has been declared the epidemic of the 21st century by World Health Organization. And breaking families, breaking family bonds, and people are going in the direction of materialism, so much individualistic that how do you think that Annie Besant's life and theosophy in general would address that?
Yeah. One of the things that's striking to me about Annie Besant, again, there's this idea of, people are great. She is literally on a pedestal right over here. So we place people high who have accomplished much. And then we forget, or either we just don't know, that there were steps along the way. And that along the way, that the experiences of these great people in many ways resemble our own. I think with her, she's a little bit exceptional in that she had too many experiences. I mean, I probably, if we wanted to aspire toward heights, we all would say we can take a little bit of pain, a little bit of suffering, but hers was extensive. She had, there was a woman who came here, I guess it was a couple of years ago. She was from England, and she came to write a book about Annie Besant. Just a couple of weeks back, I got, the first copy of it. I love the title of it. It's called The 9 Lives of Annie Besant. And she breaks it down into categories. She started as a very devout religious person. She was a believer in the Anglican Church and the way that it was put forward in their doctrine. Then she had questions about that. Those questions, Annie Besant's problem was always that her mind was too strong, if you could call that a problem. And so she had to get answers, and when she asked deep questions, the answers didn't line up according to church doctrine. Shikhar described an experience that had her question the whole authority of the divine as it's described. So she went from one thing to another, from devout to atheist. Then she wanted to heal the world's problems. I mean, everything that she did, she just kept taking step after step toward how can she be useful in alleviating some of the suffering in the world. She was pragmatic in her approach, but very refined in her thinking. But she's a person whose example speaks to us because of the way that she was willing to, first of all, explore and identify whatever to her was deeply true. That was her beginning point. At each stage, each one of these 9 lives was part of seeing something that was true, but not yet accepted, and generally in her case, not yet acceptable to the climate in which she lived. There's this expression that as people, we overwhelmingly make the mistake of feeling that agreement equals truth. If enough of us agree about a thing, it's true. Generally, the opposite is true. And anyone who has had, grade school history, we know there was a time when monarchy was accepted because it was divinely inspired. That doesn't work anymore. Then you go through other ideas that are culturally held. The ideas that there are people in this world whose status and social position can be identified quite clearly by the color of their skin, by their nation of origin, by their gender, You have half of the population, most places in the world, second-class citizens, while the men of the time rule. And in Annie Besant's time, it was even more so. But the thing that, she went from one belief to another. And in all of these things, she invested herself so wholeheartedly that she rose to the top of whatever movement it was. And in that process, she got to see things from every perspective. So when she stepped away, she knew what she was stepping away from. But always the question for her was, what is it that I am moving toward? And ultimately for her, it was, she found her home in this theosophical movement, really in the wisdom that you could describe as the ageless wisdom. It spoke to her. So in her life, really, the flow of her life from one life to another is instructive. But where she ended up is the thing that moves more toward enlightening. Everybody has their paths in life and the bumps that we hit. But where do you end up? Where does it take you? What do you do with it? And that's the thing that to me is the most instructive. That in this attempt to follow truth, she progressively dropped what she saw as expansive and then came to realize as limited until she found something that exceeded anything else that she could have seen. And to that, she devoted herself to her last day. So that level of clarity and willingness to follow her own inner guidance is what really.
And there is a wonderful word for that and maybe that's why the word that is used in that scripture is one of the favorite books of Annie Besant, is the Bhagavad Gita. And in that, Krishna tells Arjuna again and again to do his swadharma, to do your duty in that particular moment, in that particular time, space. So, as you said, I think in every such situation, she didn't compromise, and that took her to the next step. And if I may read her own words, because I think most of us here agree that Annie Besant's words have the power to not only move the minds, but the hearts also. So I will use a couple of her words. What she says is the keynote of her life. And she says, looking back today over my life, I see that its keynote, through all the blunders and the blind mistakes and clumsy follies, has been this longing for sacrifice towards something greater than the self. And I think that has been really the keynote of her life. Wherever she she wanted to help, to be of some use, either first begin with family, then after that, when she got, would say, the restrictions were cast off, she came in touch with people like Charles Bradlaugh, the National Secular Society, and she started working in that, rose up to the top. As you said, she was a wonderful orator. Then, moving around in those circles, and it was during this time, around 1880s, when, and they were like, radical activist kind of people, Charles Bradlaugh and Annie Besant. He was her mentor also. So in those days, they republished a book by Charles Knowlton on birth control, use of contraceptives and other than the morality issues. And the book was The Fruits of Philosophy. And due to that act of them, they had a court case against them, a sensational court case, I would rather say. Both of them finally acquitted from that. But the good thing from that came out, she argued for herself in the court, and with such a panache and clarity and common sense that she became like famous in the place where the majority stakeholders were males. She was immediately looked upon as a wonderful orator, and that gave her a wider platform. And so, next was again another movement. She joined a free thought movement, and where she came in touch with William Stead and George Bernard Shaw and others. And this was the same time when H.P. Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott were working for the foundation of the Theosophical Society. And I would just like you to indulge in one quote, that how close or she was, even she didn't hear of Theosophical Society at that time. She was working in the free thought movement, and she wrote in one of the publication known as Our Corner, lately there has been dawning on the minds of men, far apart in questions of theology, the idea of founding a new brotherhood in which service of human being should take place precedence to the service to God. A brotherhood in which work should be worshipped and love should be the baptism, in which none should be regarded as alien who is willing to work for human good. I mean, this is so close to the first objective of the Theosophical Society of universal brotherhood without any distinction. So, I mean, that was her destiny to come in touch with HPB and Theosophical Society. Yeah, the keynote has been the sacrifice. So it means in every situation, if we are responding from the place with minimum selfishness, at least, or I mean, I don't hear, because getting free of selfishness is a very daunting task. But at least if we are doing it with minimum or no selfishness, I think that is the swadharma or the duty in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing about her life. She ended up being the president of the Theosophical Society. She was really well known during her time as one of the great orators of her time. Wherever she went, thousands of people would come to hear her speak. For years, I have been in search of a recording of her voice. They had means of recording it in that day. We have recordings of other people who were contemporaries, but nothing with Annie Besant, this woman who spoke in India and England and America, everywhere. But she was a great orator. And she became that. She tells a story. She was married to a minister, rather narrow-minded, traditional minister. And she did everything to take care of the church. And on one occasion, she had said that she had listened to sermons and all of that, and she wondered if she could speak. And the way she tells the story, she locked the doors to the empty church. She was there cleaning up around the church. She locks the doors around her. She walks up into the pulpit, and then she just starts to speak to the empty seats. And she said in that moment is when she found that this whole process of oratory was something that just flowed through her. She called it the, paraphrase, but the most exquisite intellectual exercise that's possible. Reaching and grabbing and getting thoughts, putting it to words that then touch other people. But she did all of that. And along the way, as she went through these different movements of thought, socialism, Fabian society, free thinking, theosophy and the ageless wisdom was out there. It was happening in places around her and in the world. And she did run across it. And to her, when she first ran across it, at that point, I think it was, I don't know if she was working with the labor movement or if it was socialism at that time. But she saw it as interesting, perhaps, but much too otherworldly. It's something that the sort of problems of hunger, of wages, of equity that she was looking at that phase, how could this address it? And then it was only later, of course, that she became aware that, in fact, that's the only thing that can address it. Our friends agree.
Well, in just following up your line of thought, that's what, later, when, she herself writes that there was a point that she was questioning her own line of thought, her own principle that material comfort or material benefit is the key to happiness. Because till then, that's all what was she was trying to do, to put better working conditions or providing some labor rights or human rights. But during the same time, there was a lot of development in the field of psychology, hypnotism, mesmerism, clairvoyance, spiritualism, phenomena, and multiple personalities. And she knew that these things are happening, but she couldn't get a satisfying answer. And she was in this churning. Her mind was so like a dilemma and kind of frustrated. What can be the possible answer? And in that, normally we think that it's the secret doctrine that came to her. But before secret doctrine came to her was another book, The Occult World by A.P. Sinnett, that she says was a ray of light in this darkness. And that made her curiosity and thirst for knowledge even more. And she wanted to know more. And within 15 days of that, she gets an offer from the editor of Paul Mall Gazette, William Stead. And that was a very nice thing that he said to her, that he's the editor and he tells her that, shows her the Secret Doctrine volumes. And he says, none of my young guys, are able to do this and they are not interested. Only you are mad enough to take it and make some meaningful use of it. And can you write me a review? I'm paraphrasing it, but he did use the word mad enough. Yeah. And once she started reading it and she has explained how one after the other, her queries were resolved, and then she was so eager to meet H.P. Blavatsky, and she did. Yeah. And became a member eventually. And so, the spirit of inquiry that in theosophy is so well and truly preserved to this day, after 150 years, I think she had that not only a spark, I would say a flame. Yeah. Yeah. And that led her places, 9 lives or even more lives that she had.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if, probably many of you are aware of this kind of central book written by H.P. Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine. For those of you who are not, as I said in this book that I just read by this woman about the 9 lives, she's not a member of the Theosophical Society, but in describing this book that this gentleman gave to her to review, 2 volumes, and she describes it as a door stopper. So it is so thick that if it's a windy day and you put it on the floor, the door will not fly open. that thick. But she was one who was up to the task. I had someone not too very long ago. I mean, it's a question that comes up from time to time. And I think it was I was in the interview for the Times newspaper. Anyway, newspaper reporter. And his question was, what is it? I mean, how can you make it possible for the normal person, the common man, the common woman, to have access to this wisdom tradition? And while it's a good question, we're talking about Annie Besant today, and this is a woman of the highest intellectual ability who, she was in her 40s when she had certain life experiences that prepared her to stumble across something that started to answer some questions that she was beginning to have. I mean, until there is some sense of a need. These teachings are all around us, all the time, always have been. There is never a place or a time when they are not. They're available, the only problem is we're not. And so very often what happens, I mean, we can attest to it in our own individual ways, things happen that peel away the clouds. In her case, there was a great, kind of creative thinker in the United States. His name was Buckminster Fuller. Developed a lot of different inventions and things like that. One of the things he said in his case was, there are some people that get it with the touch of a feather. There are others who require being hit by a truck before they open up. And, according to what we have done along the way, we may have done sufficient introspection that the feather opens it for us. But no matter who we are, it's a fact that one of the tools of growth in life is crisis. And as individuals, we're very good at manufacturing those for ourselves. As a humanity, we're even better. And so this is one of the things that, at least to me, is Annie Besant was alive during World War I. She was living here. She saw that. She was alive during global depressions. She saw that. She was alive during starvation that occurred in Ireland. She worked with that. She saw enough that she recognized that there was a common thread that runs through all of this. And that it is only in finding something that exists beyond the turmoil, or beneath the turmoil, or that pervades the turmoil that we all face. That's where the strength lies. That's where the hope for humanity, that's where the hope for the individual is found. And she was the one to go ahead and try and develop that along every possible way she could. She founded the Boy Scouts in India. You can ask, what does the Boy Scouts have to do with the ageless wisdom? But it's a step along the way. She got deeply involved in politics. Most people will tell you, if you want to sacrifice your spiritual life, get involved with politics. But for her, it was an avenue, and not for her. In that case, it was for India and Great Britain to take a step, to be shown things that can influence your thinking, your behavior, to do better, to take a step closer. I mean, she had this unusual life. She's a spiritual giant, but most people who know about her because she was a political giant, or a social giant, or an educational giant.
just what you talked about if we have time.
You're the timekeeper. I think you and me could sit here a long time, but can they?
Okay, I can take a few minutes liberty. What you talked about, the thread that she saw, do you think that thread that she saw that connected everything was the source that materialized in the form of the universal invocation?
Absolutely. Same lines. Absolutely. And we said it originally, but go into it a little.
Yeah. And those who do not know the prayer that we did in the beginning, O hidden life vibrant in every atom, O hidden light shining in every creature, O hidden love embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he's also one with every other. So, I mean, in 4 lines, she has condensed the whole philosophy. And only a person with a absolute clarity can do that. And another thing, what you said about crisis, there is a very, very wonderful booklet. It's a very thin booklet, but I personally feel everyone must read it. Many of us have already read it. Meaning and use of pain. And she explains so clearly, pain is basically our ignorance of law or the hostile interaction with the law. So when we do not follow the law, the pain is the result. And use is, of course, we get to learn about the law and then follow the law to make the life in harmony with the natural order of things. And yes, I mean, without talking about her role in Indian freedom movement, I think this discussion would be, you already mentioned, and she really played a very significant role in Indian freedom movement, and it was under her inspiration, through her inspiration, that people, theosophists from here, as you mentioned the other day, separately formed a group and formed Indian National Congress, which was monumental to lead India for independence. And so many things have happened in this campus. Women's India Association for Women Empowerment, Young Men Indian Association. I mean, as you said, there is a famous saying in Indian scriptures, Hari Anant, Hari Katha Ananta. Hari is the name of divinity, Vishnu, that he or she is infinite, and talking about him is also infinite. So we can go on talking and talking and talking about Annie Besant in the same manner, but I think that won't be enough. There will still be something that we will keep for the next year. But there is one statement, a message of hers to everyone I would like to read before I invite your final views. That she, in her autobiography, she wrote, message to others, this same path of knowledge that I am treading is open to all others. Who will pay the toll demanded at the gateway? And the toll is willingness to renounce everything for the sake of spiritual truth, and willingness to give all the truth that is one to the service of human beings, keeping no shred for oneself. And I think she exemplified this in her life also, the way she gave up all her things. It's an anecdote that at the end of every year, she put her account to zero. And people would even ask her that, I mean, this is so impractical and, this is not at all logical. But she thought that the movement of money for the use of everyone is the best use of money. And Again, anecdote that one day it so happened that I have heard, I have not read in any book, that when she was in Varanasi and she had emptied her account, and her assistant or secretary asked her, "You have emptied, now what if someone comes to ask for monetary help to you now?" She didn't say anything. Just smiled or whatever, and then the next day it did happen that a person came asking for a couple of thousands of money for conducting the wedding of her child. And now this person became very curious what she will do. The assistant, that she doesn't have any money, how will she give it? And then Annie Besant told that person who came for help to wait outside, and she just went inside. Now this person became even more curious. She doesn't have the money. Why is she asking him to wait? After some time, another person came to Annie Besant, giving her the exact amount of money that Amma, she was called Amma in there, that I want to just donate this, use it for whatever you want. And then she gave to that person, and now this person became even more, do you know any magic? Yes, or have you done some, some kind of thing? But what, again, the essence of it, what she might have said, as I heard, that when you do not keep anything for yourself, your needs are fulfilled by nature and through you others.
Beautiful story.
Yeah.
So lovely story. And I think it's instructive of her life. It's instructive of the life, perhaps, the life that we can also live. One of the things with Annie Besant, I've read so much of the things that she wrote, so many things that she said. And she was always very forceful and determined in her speech. Just the one that Shikhar shared about the toll that must be paid is the willingness to give up everything is a wonderful thought, but one that for most of us is unavailable. Not to diminish what she said, but for most people, it's a choice that is a very challenging one to make. But for Annie Besant, basically this was the description of how she lived her life. There's a fellow in the United States, John Kabat-Zinn, who wrote a book called Full Catastrophe Living. She was full catastrophe. Nothing could be allowed to block her from the next thing that she could pour everything into. So there's that. But again, her life to me, her words are important. But really, with Annie Besant, as with anybody, words count for a lot. But the only way that people really teach is through their example. And for her, she was one of those people where the words matched the life. And so you find yourself now, she died in 1933. So, we're coming up toward 100 years, and still we are able to talk about her gift to the present. But we're in a different present than the time that she was living, different in some ways. Human ignorance abounds. We still have every method available, but they have expanded in ways that we can cause suffering to each other. Selfishness has not diminished. But in the face of all of that, we find ourselves here on October 1st, drawn here by someone who hasn't been with us for almost 100 years, to think about where we find ourselves now and what is our contribution, what is for us to do now. That's something that's very individual, but it's based on a foundation in something deeper. if she pointed toward anything, she pointed toward the fact that, you know, if a person who had been a devout Christian, an atheist, someone who could inhabit all of these different lives, can actually find her deepest fulfillment in a life that is really a life connected to her inner highest self, that's a lesson about a possibility. The problems of the world will not go away soon. We will change things, but we will change things for a future that is waiting for our contribution. Annie Besant lived, educated thousands, spoke about spiritual potential to perhaps millions, and left. So for us, you know, if we believe that there's something to be found in that example, the place we begin exploring is in terms of what is it in our own, what do we recognize in our own being that speaks to us of something exalted? What is it that we see in those moments of internal quiet that invites us to explore it and to commune with it more deeply? And that's where this possibility lies. She can empty out a bank account regularly because life is not compartmentalized in the way that we like to think it is. It's constantly flowing. We're a part of that. And so for me, at least today, you know, my takeaway from Annie Besant's life is that this possibility not only is within us, but it's strongly within us. Why? Because the very fact that we're here says that we're interested, says that we're near to it. I think that's the ground that we need to cultivate and live with going forward. And that's the thing that we can be thankful to Annie Besant, to Shikhar for sharing the stories about her life, to you. That's about what I have.
Thank you for those really insightful final words. And yes, apart from inspiration, it's inquiry within us in the quiet that each one of us should pursue when we return from here. So thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
The time, I'm sorry, I'm a bad timekeeper.
Hopefully nobody noticed.
No. And again, heartfelt gratitude for being here and making this, I would not say just an event, it's a celebration of Annie Besant, even more vital with your thoughts. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. But before we disperse, I request Jaishree ji to sing a song that is written for Annie Besant.
This song is in Vasanta Raga. Vasanta was an Indian name given to Dr. Annie Besant. So it is very appropriate. And this song also highlights her qualities. Devi Vasanthe, Devi Vasanthe, Jaya Jaya Potri Nintiruvarul Potri Mai Devi Vasanthe. Navi Narasi Saliyadurai Pavalena Navi Narasi Saliyadurai Pavalena பூவுலகம் முழுதும் புகழ் கொடி நாட்டிய பூமி அரசர் கொண்டாடமை காட்டிய தேவி வசந்தே. ஜெய ஜெய போற்றி நின் திருவருள் போற்றி தேவி வசந்தே.